Stanley's was taking his wife home when a thug approached and begged for his wife. Vivian wanted to give him money. Stanley immediately stopped his wife and told the thug to get away quickly. This made the thug very angry. The result was a split second. Behind the street guy, the thugs immediately attacked and knocked Stanley unconscious. Then the thug grabbed Vivian and stabbed her twice. The thug standing next to him frantically trampled Stanley, who was falling to the ground. Then the thugs grabbed her bag, or Vivian, and then escaped the scene. When Sally's woke up, his wife had left him forever. This made Sally extremely painful. He quickly went to the police station the next day. The police successfully arrested 5 suspects for confirmation. Stanley only took a quickly look and found out that the murderer was named Sally Fly. He had a tattoo on his face, but after the police heard him named it, his face became extremely unsightly, and he didn't say a word after that. Leaving the room, Sally was suspicious and went to the hall to wait. At this time, Sally was taken out again. After he finished signing, the police immediately let him go. Stanley saw everything and was extremely surprised. Sally felt his eyes. Stanley still giggled and blinked, then quickly left the police station. Stanley was stunned. He was extremely angry and went to the police to argue with the police. The result was that the police said that there was not enough evidence and they could not arrest the person facing the crime. Police officer Stanley's casual attitude suddenly became extremely calm. If the law could not uphold justice, Stanley decided to take action himself. Sure enough, after Stanley left, Police Chief Jason finally spoke up. Because he let Sally go, it turned out that Sally was a subordinate of the most powerful gangster in that area, Limu Lem. At night, when Sally returned home, he opened the wardrobe and pulled out his clothes. Stanley directly broke the wall. Not long after, Stanley took out a box from it. Then Stanley fluently opened the box and inside, stored submarine guns, papers of all kinds and many pistols. It turned out that Stanley was a first-class soldier who had been discharged from the army 20 years later. Stanley took it. I called out my phone to call my teammates. Before, Dennis, I needed some names. The next day, Stanley went to a barber shop to look for Dan teammates. By this time, Di had already sorted out the list. It turned out that they were a group of drug traffickers. Upon receiving this list, Stanley immediately began to act based on the information on it. Stanley went to a shop here. He quickly found a name on the list. Only after Stanley saw that name took the bag from wife did Stanley surely this guy is the accomplices. At that time, the accomplices also discovered his difference. After he saw Stanley's face, he immediately reacted and started to crawl. Stanley followed very closely. The two quickly started fighting, but when Stanley chased them out, they disappeared. At this time, Stanley's attention was attracted by a man sitting in the, but a second later, a pistol was pressed into back of Stanley's girl. He pretended to be subdued, then quickly fought back. Stanley asked him where Sally was, but the accomplice was very stubborn and refused to say a word. At this time, the sound of a police car was heard outside. The accomplice Lo saw that he was losing concentration and wanted to pick up the shotgun on the ground, but as soon as he acted, Stanley and Di immediately ended his life after checked all of the copper Lo's personal belongings, and they threw him into a bucket to destroy his body. At this time, the same criminal Lumine received the news and immediately ordered the entire family of Stanley and Denial to be arrested. Dennis immediately locked his phone, but the phone only had the phone number of a tattoo shop, which the man named Trong Dac Sach was. The employee of this tattoo shop was very clear that he was another accomplice. He quickly found the tattoo shop, but he wasn't there, so he had to pretend he was a customer and wait for another party. Dennis returned to the shop, haircut, but everything was mixed up. The killer was also here. They asked where Stanley was, but Dennis didn't say, so immediately counterattacked. Stanley immediately started taking action. Dennis quickly took care of them, but because his leg was seriously injured, he stopped. Let run away. At this time Stanley was falling. I was waiting. I immediately recognized Stanley, so he pulled out his stick and pointed it at Stanley. This moment Sally calmly stood up. That car immediately dropped the stick. Sally started punching really hard. She strongly waved her sword to fight back. Seeing this, she also picked up the handmade knife next to her. She immediately controlled her, but she still refused to tell Sally location, so she immediately waved her knife to deal with her later. Then Stanley successfully found a large bag of opium in the next store. Stanley rushed to reunite with Dennis. After the two of them finished processing the body, Sty also prepared to use this bag of opium to set a trap to attract Sally. The next day, Stanley's daughter, Bay, brought her husband to Stanley's house to borrow a car, but at this time Sally suddenly appeared and directly launched an attack. At this time, Stanley drove home, but fortunately, Bay was okay. Although Bay's husband was hit, bullet, but it was not life-threatening, which made Stanley very embarrassed. Luckily that evening he found Sally's phone number and phone, and the two quickly started texting back and forth. Sally used that buffet bag of medicine and successfully made a date with Sally. Go out. Sally quickly rushed to the bar to meet. At this time, Sally had already finished the ambush. Sally saw that and quickly grabbed an innocent security guard. Sure enough, someone couldn't help but open fire on Sally after Dan was below. When the floor saw it, it quickly shot and killed the shooter. Sally and the others wanted to rush out, but were suppressed by Stolly and Di with firepower. Sty quickly caught Sally, was scared and told a secret. It turns out that they robbed Vivian after knowing that Stanley opened fire and killed her. At this time, Lim Munster's subordinate brought weapon to support them, which with the coordination of Slay and Die, the two of them directly opened it. After arriving home, Sally immediately checked her wife's phone through a voice massage from her colleague's phone. Sally felt something was wrong. It turned out that his wife was an employee working in the office. The mayor of this area. The mayor wants to fake the data that the crime rate in this area has decreased, but Sally's wife doesn't agree. Could it be that the mayor is the real murderer? On the other hand, Sally's daughter Abby is planning to take her family, went to the hotel to take refuge, but in the end, they were still one step late. Lim Mun sent someone to search for Abby's house. Seeing this, he immediately picked up a knife and started to protest. Abby Lemmy husband's sister wanted to stop the result that Lemio had set up, immediately opened fire to deal with Lemmy. Bay didn't dare to move anymore. Lemmy Moi told Bay to call Stanley here quickly after Stanley received Abby text massage. He also had a bad feeling because Abby had never sent Stanley a text message before. Carrying the weapon, she went to Abby's house. Sally saw the situation inside through the window, so Sally quietly entered the house through the upstairs. Seeing Stanley's subordinates, she immediately rushed out. Deal with him now. Limey he wanted to threaten Abby when he appeared. Stanley was helpless and had no choice but to throw it down. Limey wanted to achieve his goal and play tricks on Abby, but he didn't know that Dennis had been standing behind Stanley for a long time. And then one shot hit Stanley through a target right away. Tang rushed in and grabbed Lim Mun and gave him a few more kicks, completely losing his ability to act. After that, Stanley forced him to ask Lim Mun, the mastermind behind it, was it the mayor? Was it the mayor who told you to do it? Before waiting for him to answer, Lim Mun's head was shot to pieces. It was Detective Gibson who handled Stanley's case. This was like continuing to answer Stanley's question. Gibson's advised Stanley, if you stop, you can still come back. Life is normal, but Stanley, how can Stanley agree? Turns out Joseon Rescue was very sensible and surrendered. Sty immediately told Jason to drive to the market house. At this time, there were guards around the market chief house. Stanley didn't care about these things, immediately knocked Gibson unconscious. When Gibson woke up, he was surprised to see that all the guards outside were lying down, and the car's oil can had also been burned. Jason wanted to run away, but he was handcuffed. Walked was placed in the back trunk. As soon as he got out of the car immediately exploded. At this moment, Stanley went inside the house after taking care of all the bodyguard here. Mayor MOV took out this gun and went into battle. As soon as he started, he gave Stanley a blow. Stanley immediately arrested him. At first, he fought back. Finally, Stanley pulled out and directly finished Mop. At this time, there were many police outside, pointing guns at Stanley. Seeing this, Stanley calmly went out. All the police advised Stanley to quickly put down his weapon. But it's clear that Stanley wants to escape from this place, then he must raise his weapon immediately. All the police on the opposite side opened fire. Even though Stanley had a bulletproof vest, he was seriously injured. Stanley was quickly taken to the hospital. The hospital was able to easily escape danger. But because of murdering the mayor, Sally would have to face life in prison. It's unacceptable when people aren't paying attention. She went into Stanley's hospital room just to meet her dad for the last time. But they were quickly taken away from the scene by the police. In the evening, a policeman came to replace him. It was Walker. Before that, he immediately pulled out a gun and went into Stanley's hospital room. He wanted to retaliate for his partner, but Stanley didn't panic because just now Bay brought him a gun. The next second he immediately took action. At this time Dennis, pretending to be a doctor, also came to the hospital room. Then he took the car arrived to take Stanley away from the hospital. At the same time, Dai also arranged the plane just like that. Sally smoothly went abroad. This is the end of the movie. Everyone, remember to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the movie. Bye bye.